Hi there. Today I'm going to do a GPU overclocking without Furmark. Furmark is one of the most used applications to stress GPUs and find artifacts. Instead, I'm going to use Cinebench with MSI Afterburner as overclocking tool. I can already tell you not to copy this. Please see the video to the end and subscribe for further videos. Cinebench is one of the most common applications to stress CPUs, but it can also be used to stress GPUs. Here I have loaded a GPU test and popped up Afterburner at the same time. First, I will do a normal GPU stress test without changing anything in Afterburner. Then I change the core clock and memory clock to max until Cinebench is artifacting and crashing. I will not change voltage in this test. Most of the time, the core clock is more sensitive than memory clock. This graphic card with RTX 3060 should in normal case manage at least 10% in both variables, else it's in bad condition. Here we will see that it will crash under a core overclocking. That will then give me an indication of the max overclock. I have to lower the clock and start Cinebench again. I will tweak the clock until it's stable and then fiddle with the memory again until both are stable. During a test like this, it's important to check the main temperatures of the computer. Since it's only a GPU overclocking, it's most of the time no problem if you don't change the voltage. But other temperatures can give an indication how the temperature is spreading in the computer case during test. It can then be important to know if you're going to change the cooling in the computer. Cinebench can also randomly crash because of memory settings of the computer and motherboard. If you experience problem, try to turn off BIOS profiles for XMB created for Intel or AMD Expo for AMD, just to allocate such problem. In normal case, you should have it turned on for maximum performance. The default core clock was 1912 MHz and memory clock was 7300 MHz. In this case, with at least 10% overclock, it should result in 2103 MHz core clock and 8030 MHz memory clock. Afterburner is reporting the effective DDR clock speed, so it's figuring the 4x rate that is utilized in current GDDR memory. GPU-Z actually reports the actual memory frequency. This can be different depending on card. NVIDIA has paired 12 GB GDDR6 memory with the GeForce RTX 3060 12 GB, which are connected using a 192-bit memory interface. The GPU is operating at a frequency of 1320 MHz, which can be boosted up to 1777 MHz. Memory is running at 1875 MHz. 15 gigabits per second effective. In Afterburner, neither core clock or memory clock are correct. These numbers are important, but in this test we are going to do a percentage overclock 10% or above, so they really don't make any difference. You can easily see how boost clock turns on and off, and also how the temperature rises and lowers. If the temp sensor becomes too hot, it will automatically throttle back the clock speed. I don't have any actual number for RTX 3060 12 GB. It says that when 3060 Ti reaches 83 Celsius, the clock speed will begin to throttle back. I guess that most cards will throttle back between 80 to 85 Celsius. Some people may think that overclocking is not necessary since graphic cards doing boost, but it's still possible to achieve some more performance in FPS if it's necessary. It's up to you if you want to leave performance on the table or not, or think it's more important to have a working card for a very long time. Either case, you have to consider the condition of the card, especially if it's been used for mining. Let's speed up things even more. Here it is obvious that Cinebench crashed when I increased the memory frequency. It happened several times, but artifacts were never seen as the output is completely different than in Furmark. Here we have the result with using Cinebench as stress test for overclocking in Afterburner. Let us do the math. Core clock plus 220 MHz and memory clock plus 900 MHz. Default was 1912 and 7300. The result is 2132 MHz and 8200 MHz. In percentage, it will be 11, 5% overclock for the core and 12, 3% overclock for the memory. The result is a little bit higher than the target for this used graphic card. How useful is this overclock? Is it possible to use it in other benchmarks and games? Well, the easiest way is to try it first in Unigine Heaven. Let's fire up Heaven Benchmark and see how it works. Well, it works like crap even before the real benchmark. Let's do the real benchmark. And there it crashed. Let's lower the core clock to 20 MHz less. Looks like a scrub. And here we go. Here we see choppiness because of video capturing. And here the benchmark. Now it came further. Let's run the full test. This is a really good result. Almost as good as the RTX 3060 Ti. Really good lowest FPS, but peaks not as good. Let's take a look at Afterburner monitor. Couldn't see any heat issues in either overclock. The threshold seems to be 83 degrees Celsius. The conclusion is that the first overclock didn't work outside of Cinebench, and we have found a better overclock. Now we have 4 clocks to test in Cinebench: default, target, result 1, and result 2. Result 1 is already disqualified. I will run all of them in a 10-minute test. First up is default setting with 100% clocking. That is factory setting. The result for default settings is 7,592. The benchmark for result 1 hold out for 10 minutes in the first test, and I get the result 8423. When I redo the test, Cinebench reveals this bad overclock when it crashes during the last seconds. During this test, I did a hardware monitoring in Afterburner, and it shows no temperature problems. Now is result 1 double disqualified. Somehow Cinebench is much more forgiving, but after several tests it will crash. The test itself is very on and off, which probably causes the graphics card to recover in most cases. The heat is never a problem because it doesn't even reach the threshold, and then it will never throttle down because of heat. If we regulated the voltage, the result would be different. But to benefit from such regulation, we would also need better GPU cooling to get more performance out. Here it's a crash I couldn't fully capture. And this is after the crash. Let's see what a 10% boost stable overclock can do in Cinebench. Here we get 8,342 points, which is not too bad. Let's try the final overclocking called result 2. The final overclocking is not far away. It's slightly better in performance with 8,439 points. It's time to wrap this up and come with some conclusions. Regarding the data from the tests, there are some interesting observations. In the vast majority of cases, frequencies are reflected in Cinebench results. The big difference occurs between default and 10% boost overclock. The only time it doesn't fully reflect is when it's overclocked too much and really should crash. Tests confirm that it is rarely good to be on the edge. Lowering the overclock from a maximum value usually pays off. Result 1 is disqualified since it crashed after 10 seconds in heaven and after 2 rounds of Cinebench of totally 20 minutes. When you sit and do something, it's easy to forget why you did it in the first place. But I saved it at the last moment. I have tested Result 1 and Result 2 for 5 minutes each in Furmark, and neither showed any artifacts or crashes. In the hardware monitor, it was obvious that Furmark was pushing the graphics card up to the threshold value before throttling down. But Furmark in this case was better at warming up the card than revealing a bad clock. It lost against heaven. There are several conclusions to be drawn from these tests. Cinebench is not the best alternative to Furmark since the test is on and off. It can certainly be used to stress test overclocked graphics cards, but it should be supplemented with something else. There is a twist in this tale. Furmark is still a great way of heating up a CPU and GPU. Great when changing the thermal paste, but probably not good enough for a gamer as a stress test. Both Furmark and Cinebench feels overrated. Furmark is almost as old as OpenGL. Benchmarks like Heaven and 3D Mark are probably better for a gamer who wants to try out the health condition of the GPU or getting the highest stable overclock. Regarding overclocking and Afterburner, I can also recommend overclocking the RTX 3060 12GB and 10% both on core and memory. If the graphics card is fresh enough, it will almost perform like an RTX 3060 Ti in default. Since a lot of VRAM is wanted these days, it is an option to still be able to play new demanding games in low or medium resolution without any major problems. I had hoped to do a real voiceover, but as my 1-year-old daughter is good at rattling or sleeping, it had to be this artificial version for the time being. This video has not been sponsored by any company. Since I am doing this for my own interest, you are most welcome to like this video and follow the channel here on YouTube and on the website hardqare.com.
Shut up.